Hello everybody, welcome to the garden and the last day of summer 2025. Now whether you are a new gardener who really just wants to get into gardening and you've never started anything before, or whether you are an established gardener who is revamping an area of the garden like I'm going to be doing today, the steps for success are basically the same, and it's all going to start with the soil. And that's what we're going to tackle in the first part of today's video. We're going to go through and we're going to amend this area of soil and get it ready for spring blooms and summer 2026 annuals. Hello, my name is Lynette and welcome to my garden. After selecting the location that you want your garden in or you want to revamp, the next thing you're going to have to do is remove any plant material that is currently there. And this area used to have Stella d'Oro daylilies all in it. It was all around this stock tank pond. And I put a notice on Facebook Marketplace that people could come and dig them out. So they all came, dug them out, took them all away. And what I'm working on now is going through and pulling out any roots or remaining plants, because I want this area to be clear of any vegetation. And if you're starting a new garden, that's what you're going to want to do too. You need to kill off any grass or weeds that you might have there. Now, I dug these all out, or I had people come and dig them out. That was easy because I knew what was here. If you've got a lawn and you're going to be trying to revamp that and you need to kill the grass down, there's a couple different ways you can do it, and that's going to be entirely up to you. Of course, there's the chemical means, which, there's a lot of controversy about that, especially if you're going to try and be doing vegetables, because do you really want to be ingesting the possibility of some of those chemicals? The other thing that you can do, which works really, really well, especially if you're not 100% ready to start your garden right now, because realistically, if you're new to gardening, you need to be doing everything right now to get this soil ready to go. But the simplest thing you can do is just dump piles and piles and piles of leaves on the area that you want the grass to be killed off. I mean by putting piles of leaves on, 2-3 feet high, and let that sit on there over the winter. And then in the spring, you should be able to remove that and till that area up, and there's a good chance that the grass will be dead underneath there. But that's a real simple way to kill off the grass and get started in the spring with your garden. But if I were starting, if you were asking me personally, what would I be doing to get ready right now? I'd be killing off that grass, or I would have actually started a lot sooner, maybe by solarizing, putting some plastic down and letting the sun bake the plants underneath there so that they don't grow, that they can't grow. And then you could get in and start amending the soil like we're going to do in a little bit. But I can't stress enough the importance of getting rid of every single weed that you possibly can before you even start planting in that garden area. And starting sooner than later is always better. And I'm going to tell you also, there's nothing wrong with, say this year you just put a big pile of leaves on there and you let that sit all season, and then throughout the summer maybe you go in there and you start working the soil. That is absolutely perfect too, because the number one thing that's going to discourage you from gardening is going to be weeds. And if you start weed free, that's half the battle of having fun with gardening. Anyway, let's go back to this area. I'm coming through here and I am pulling out any of the weeds or any of the roots that are remaining from the daylilies. And I'm going in here and just basically pawing through the soil with my hands. Now, I have really, really sandy soil, so this is no problem for me to do this. You might need a tiller. You might need to get a shovel and stir this up, which I have used a shovel to do this. But as I said, the main thing you want to do is get rid of any kind of possible vegetation that might be growing before we move on to the next step. This is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. We've got some sedum here that needs to come out. We've got some weeds. They've got to come out. We have some phlox that needs to come out. Anything growing where you don't want it to be is a weed. It doesn't matter if it has a pretty flower on it. If you don't want it there, you've got to get it out of there. Now you can repot up the seed or the sedum if that's what you want to do. You want to make sure this is part of a clump of daylilies, and we want to get that out of there because we just want to have some really nice, loose garden soil. Let's see. And I don't want to take the chance of any of these daylilies growing back. So I want to make sure, because I can see right there, there's the crown of a daylily, and that would start coming up. Now, I do expect that I'm probably going to miss a couple, which, you know, I can come in the spring and get those. But I definitely don't want to have hundreds of stellas coming up in this area next year. Now, my plan for this area is to plant tulips using the trench method. Therefore, I'm going to dig out around the pond here an area that is roughly about 5 to 6 inches deep, because that's the recommended depth to plant the tulips. I'm going to go all around here and remove some of this soil so that I can plant the tulips in here quickly. If I see any extra roots that I missed, I'm going to try and get them out now. I see a couple right there. Now, if I were doing, say, a vegetable garden where I'm going to be growing annual vegetables, I would still probably want to add some compost to this soil. But I could also consider putting in a cover crop. But again, you don't want to do anything until you've got all the weeds under control here. But you could put in a cover crop of winter wheat or winter rye, and then you till that in the spring. You till that directly into the soil, and as that breaks down, it helps feed your plants. Now, if you're going to add compost, which I'm not going to add compost right now, and I'll explain why in a little bit, but if I was going to add compost, I would add well-aged cow manure, and my preference is cow manure over horse manure because cows have 4 stomachs, and when they eat seeds, as they go through those 4 stomachs, the seeds become digested. Unlike a horse, when they eat seeds, because they don't have 4 stomachs, when that seed passes through the animal into the manure, there's a good chance that seed is still viable. So you've just spent all this time making sure your garden is weed-free, and then if you go and you add in compost or any amendment that is possibly infested with weeds, weed seeds, you've just made more work for yourself. Now, I wish I could tell you there was an easy way to get huge amounts of composted manure that you were sure isn't loaded with all kinds of weed seeds, and I really can't give you any great recommendations on that except maybe call your local Master Gardener program and see if any of them can recommend a farmer or somebody who has really good compost. But you have to be very careful with it. I remember up at the extension in the gardens there, they had somebody, one of the Master Gardeners found a farmer that had composted manure that they would drop off to the extension for them to add into their gardens. And they were so excited about that. And they got their load of compost, only to find out it was infested with horsetail, which horsetail is one of those plants that you can really never truly eradicate in your garden. And the only way to get rid of it is really to move, because it'll be there long after you're gone. So be very, very careful. And I'm not saying farmers are bad or their compost is bad, but farmers farm differently than we do when we have a small vegetable garden or a perennial garden. They're usually growing annual crops, so they're in there tilling every year, amending the soil every year. They rotate their crops. You know, they're down to a science, and they are much more capable of managing weeds than, say, you or I can. Because, quite frankly, most of them have gone to school for farming, and they know what the heck they're talking about. And if you ask any farmer worth his salt, he's going to tell you maintaining the soil is the key to their success. So that's what we're doing here too. We're taking a tip from a farmer, and we're going to make sure that our plants start out with the best possible soil. Anyway, I'm going around here and I'm removing some of this soil right now so I can plant tulips. Now, if I was planting perennials, you've got to remember that perennials stay in the ground for many, 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 many years. You're not getting in there and dividing them up or removing them every year like you would be if you were growing annuals or even many of your vegetable crops. So when you're planting or planning your perennial garden, you need to plan long-term for your soil, and you want to add as much organic matter. By that, I'm talking compost, leaf mold, anything that can help your soil be as nutrient healthy as possible for as long as possible. So you really don't want quick release kind of fertilizers, because your plants are in there for the long haul. I have some bone meal laying around, so I've tossed that in, and then I'm just going to stir up the soil so the bulbs don't come in such direct contact with the fertilizer, even though bone meal is organic, so it's not going to really burn the bulbs that much. But I want the fertilizer down where the roots of the bulbs are going to be. Okay, I think we can now start planting the bulbs. The bulbs I'm planting today came from Walmart. They were a pink and purple mix. So I don't really know the variety names, but I will put a picture on the screen of the package. Now, normally, oh, here's a good example. When you're planting your bulbs, they should be nice and firm. This one's shriveled up, really light. It's almost like a skeletonized tulip bulb, so there's really nothing viable in there, so I'm just going to toss that to the side. And you want to make sure you put the pointy side up, and you can usually see where the roots are. That's kind of the flat side that goes on the bottom. According to the package directions, you want about 9 bulbs per square foot. I'm trying to space them a little bit staggered, maybe about 3 or 4 inches apart. I'm trying to be careful not to put them underneath the lip of the stock tank so that they don't maybe grow into that and get caught in it, so they're a little ways out. And I'm just going to go around and tuck them all in here. Now, this is really the first time I've put tulips in, because unlike daffodils, which don't get eaten by critters, tulips must be pretty darn tasty, because deer like them, chipmunks like them, everything likes them. So I'm taking a risk by putting them in. We have a lot of chipmunks, but I'm hoping that they won't find them. And tulips, basically, you treat as an annual. So I'm going to be pulling out all of these after they're done blooming. And it's when they're done blooming and I pull them out is when I'm going to come in and actually add some well-composted cow manure to this bed. I'm going to, when I pull the tulips out, I'm going to take the bulbs and everything out because they're not going to come back reliable next year. I'm going to pull them out, just toss them away, and then I will kind of fork up the soil and mix in some good compost so that when I come back in here and plant annuals, there will be some additional nutrients for them, because the tulips are going to take up what nutrients are in here right now. Now my soil, as I mentioned, is very sandy. It's a little bit on the acidic side. If you are trying to grow something a little bit more specific, say blueberries or rhododendrons and azaleas, you're going to need to make sure you have an acidic soil, in which case I would strongly suggest you get a soil test done, and you can get that usually done at your local extension, or if they can't do it, they can refer you to someplace where you can. But you just basically send in a little baggy size of soil to the lab. You tell them what you're trying to grow. You know, I'm going to grow blueberries, or I'm going to grow a lawn, or I'm going to grow vegetables, because different plants have different, not just acid requirements, they also have different nutrient requirements. And your soil test can give you some direction on what type of plants and what nutrients they're going to need. When the daylilies were dug out from this area, I lost a fair amount of soil because obviously it was attached to the roots of the daylilies. So I'm going to have to come in here and add some more soil along with some of that soil that I took out. Now, you can see how terribly dry this is. That's because we haven't gotten any rain to speak of. I went to Lowe's and they had some garden soil that was on sale. So I picked that up so that I can mix that in. Hopefully this will have a little bit more organic matter in it than what my soil has, and will help once the rains do start coming, that we will have a little bit of moisture retention here, as well as nutrients for the plants. Now, this is actually Scott's Turf Builder lawn soil for lawn repair and overseeding, with a starter fertilizer already mixed in. And it says it's native topsoil, and it does not contain grass seed. So I think I'm not too picky about what soil goes in here. I just want it to be a little bit better than mine. And I'm sorry this is gonna hit the microphone. But we're just going to dump some of this around. This actually feels like it's got some good organic matter in it, which this part of my garden is seriously lacking in it. But that's because those daylilies have been growing in this spot for so many years, it's hard to add organic matter. That's why I say when you're growing perennials, invest in the soil so that you get years and years of growth. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of this soil on top of that. So I'm going to layer. I've got a couple bags of this. I'm going to do some layering and get this all mixed together. Now that I've got 3 layers on, I'm going to come through and I'm just going to lightly step this down. I'm not going to put all my full weight on top of the bulbs. But right now, this is like sifted flour. There's so much air in this soil that it looks a lot fuller than it really is. Whether you have sandy soil like I do that has no moisture retentive organic material in it, or you have clay soil where it's hard and hard to work with, then you need to add organic matter. You can't add enough organic matter. Sandy soil, that's going to help hold on to the moisture, and in clay soil, when you mix it in really well, that's going to cause pores on. The earthworms are going to get in there, oxygen is going to take place, and that's what your plants are going to like. So the key is to add as much organic matter as you can. Whatever you do, if you have clay soil, do not add sand. Adding sand to clay soil creates concrete, and that's definitely not what you want. I'm going to use this bag soil to finish the top of it, and then I'm going to take what's left in the wheelbarrow and use that for a rut in the yard, because I think this soil is going to, number one, retain moisture better than my sandy soil, and it's also going to give a more finished look since it's got so much organic matter in it. It's almost as dark as a nice layer of compost. And I'm not going to step this layer down, and I didn't want to step this down too hard because when we do get rain, cross our fingers, I want it to soak in. I don't want this to be so hard that it prevents it from going down. So we're just going to keep adding this all the way around. I think we can officially call this tulip planting project done. If there are a couple takeaways from today's video, I'd like them to be, if you're revamping or starting a new garden, amend that soil. Get it as healthy and as rich as you possibly can. Get rid of the weeds. That's going to save you in the long run because nobody likes weeding. And then I'd love to hear some comments from experienced gardeners who might be watching this. How do you feel about what I've said in this video? What do you do to enrich your soil? And how do you control the weeds? Also, I'm wondering, what are your guys' thoughts, tulips versus daffodils? If I was a new gardener, and if you're a new gardener, I'm going to tell you to plant daffodils because the deer and the rabbits and the chipmunks don't eat them, and they naturalize, which means they multiply and they come back year and year and year. Whereas the tulips, they're annuals. You put them in one year and you're going to yank them out because they don't naturalize like you would expect a tulip or a daffodil to do, or a regular perennial. So don't count your tulips as perennials. And if you are in a warm climate, you're going to have to chill your tulip bulbs, which is something that we don't have to do here in Zone 5. Anyway, thanks so much for watching, guys. I appreciate all of you so much. Get out in your garden and have some fun.